I've been, this is like something that I felt for a while, but I think lately now I've like formulated an actual theory. I don't know if it's a theory, but um, a kind of like law of the world or something in my viewpoint. So I suspect, I really feel like if you look at, basically by the time of the era of the iPhone 6, 6S, and to be honest, probably the same is true for, Android devices and things like that, because, in terms of specs and stuff, I think phones have largely progressed at the same rate, right? I think at that point in time, the decision on whether to get a new phone became very ambiguous and, like you said, almost artificial in some cases, right? So you said that maybe it was just a forcing function because you were renewing a self contract or something.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
And I think a lot of people were like that, right? They could not explain why they're getting a new phone other than some artificial thing, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like, oh, it's been 2 years. There's a new phone. I should get it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
especially when the new features are not that compelling, right?
Yeah.
It's not like the features that were coming out were like, oh my god, I need that, right?
Yeah. And again, these phones every year get better. I'm not denying that, right? Like there's improvements every year, and objectively the phone this year is going to be better than the phone last year, right?
Yes.
Like
yeah.
that's I think everyone realizes that. But this is how I see things now. I think because I was also like, I've went back and forth around different ways to look at like a decision like this, right? Like when do I get a new phone, right? And to be honest, at one point it was literally, I was like, I don't know, so I'm just gonna buy one every year, which sounds crazy, but I was like, I have no way to make this decision, right? Because like, what is it like? Do I wait 2 years, right? Do I wait 1 year? And if you do the math, actually, because I sell and like recycle, I guess, like give.
Well, I think
like,
that's one of the big things. Yeah. That's one of the big things. I think like for people who are listening, like I think one thing when you say that statement, I'm going to buy a new phone every year. I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is that you're selling your old ones and actually making money off your old ones.
Yeah, and so whether I do that every year or 2 years, right? There's more money at the point of purchase. I have to put that money up front, but I can sell a 1-year-old phone for more money than a 2-year-old phone, right?
Yeah.
And so there's not a huge difference, realistically speaking. I think I did the math and really with that scheme, you really have to wait at least 3 or 4 years where it starts becoming, significantly cheaper versus what you can sell it for. But so I think there's really only 2 ways to look at phone purchases. And this might extend to other things, but phones I think are particularly acute because it's the only thing where I think a lot of people do at least like consider a purchase when they see that come out, right? Because Apple releases, I think like MacBooks probably get updated almost every year, right?
More. They usually get a refresh every year or two. Yeah.
So, but I don't know about you, but it's not like in the back of my mind, I don't have this huge dilemma of like, okay, do I get a new, like it's 2020. Like,
you're right.
You know what I mean?
Kind of till it becomes almost unusable, right? We kind of keep it, right?
Yeah. So phones are weird because, and I think for good purpose, I think there's very few devices you rely on so much, but I actually think now that there's only 2 ways to look at this decision. One way being, and this is realistically what most people, how they should look at it. Is your current phone broken? And if it's not, then you there's really, as assuming you have something newer than an iPhone 6, there's like actually no reason. There's no reason, right? And so that should be
okay. Well, hold on. What do you define as broken though?
So something that is so like I would say, obviously, if you can't even use it, but even battery, so legitimately, if your battery is just not holding a charge, even then though, like you have a choice. You
can replace the battery.
It's actually, Apple actually makes it quite cost effective to just replace a battery.
Yeah, you're totally
even
right.
on the latest
totally
phones, it's maybe $100, $200, which is again a fraction of the price of a brand new device, right?
Again, brand new iPhone 12, right? $1,000, so a tenth of the cost to just replace the battery. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's just your battery, I still don't think it qualifies like to buy a new phone.
Not to mention the screen, right? The screen is actually only about $100, $200 to replace or whatever, right? Again, fraction of the cost.
Exactly. So I think that's one method, and to be honest, I think most people should just fall under that. Okay. There's another way to look at this because obviously you and I both understand like we're probably not like, at least me, I'm not someone who's like okay, I'm just going to use it until it stops working. I
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
like I value something different in this type of purchase, right? Which is the incremental improvements. It's I mean, I think you and I, especially since we're familiar with software, I think we have an appreciation for that, right?
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
is
yeah.
what the thing that I realized is that I think when you look at a phone as kind of a traditional purchase, like a one-time event, and it's a thing, then you again you just default to that decision. Is it broken or not, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not, then keep using it. If it is, buy a new one. But there's another way to look at this, which I think I realize from what we can learn from software, right? And so, like you and I probably both pay for a lot of software that's monthly fee, right?
Yeah.
Everything from like accounting stuff to messaging stuff, anything, right? So that's really interesting because what in the software world, like we wouldn't complain about, oh, they made some minor improvements this like last update,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like that's why we love software like that, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't it's not like in the back of the days of like you buy Windows 95 and that's what
Yeah,
you
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah,
until there's
yeah.
Windows 98, right? The fact that you pay a monthly fee and it gets updated, and so that's another way to look at it. And I realized like, yeah, you know what, that's the other way to make this type of decision where are you buying it because you just need a device that works, or are you buying this because you actually want to buy into incremental improvements, right?
Right,
And
right, right.
treat it as a recurring cost, right? The
Right.
same way that you pay, $30 a month for some software that you expect to keep updating, but you're okay with it not being. It's not like, oh, it's a new year. You don't expect it to be like, oh, a completely new revamp, right? And
Yeah,
in
yeah,
some
yeah,
ways,
yeah, yeah,
actually, you
yeah.
don't want that to happen. In some ways, like the familiarity and constant improvement is actually great, right? Because you're familiar with it, it just keeps getting better. So I think that's another way to look at this. Is like you either again buy a phone if your existing one is broken, or you look at this as like cool, like this is a recurring cost, and I think at most frequent it's every time there's a new phone, but it doesn't have to be. You could also
Yeah.
be like this is a recurring cost on every 2 year basis, right?
Yeah.
But it's not because you have to struggle with this decision of do I get a new phone? Is it so much better than the last year that I really need to buy a phone now? Because I think there's no good answer to that, right? Like you're just gonna be, okay, maybe I want it. Do I need the better camera? There's no clear answer to that. So the only way to reconcile that is it's a recurring thing, and it almost you treat it as if similar to software, right?
But it's kind of weird though, because I feel like that would usually be a mindset that comes from the seller, not the buyer, right? It's almost like the seller would sell that first before the buyer makes that kind of conclusion, right? And it's like I feel like if Apple was like, we've moved to now basically like a subscription model
Yeah,
where it's like you just pay us, $100 a month and you get basically the latest greatest phone every time, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Um, I feel like that might be easier to swallow with that. But I
exactly.
mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you're just rationalizing, purchasing a new phone every
Well,
every year.
no, I mean, so I think you make a really good point. Like, my thing I was going to finish off with here is, it's just I feel that the nature of these devices has changed over the
Yeah.
last 4 or 5 years, but the way to buy them hasn't. And I think that is a
Yes.
real
Yeah.
problem here, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because they're still treating it as if you're buying and making the decision like it was when an iPhone 3GS or 4 came out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's a big purchase, but hey, like, it's so much better than the last one. I'm gonna buy it to get like the cutting edge thing, and that's still how these purchase decisions go. But I actually don't think that's what these devices are anymore, right? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually think if Apple came out with some sort of subscription model, I'd probably be completely game for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, I don't even have to make the decision on when I should buy a new phone. I just have to make a decision on how much am I willing to spend on a recurring basis, right? Like, what is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
worth to me?
Exactly.
So you're right. You're right. I think this is a hard thing because most people can't see it that way because everyone from like the cell phone companies to the Apple and Google, they're still treating it like when they originally came out with these phones, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think that's how. Yeah,
And I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious because I mean, I think they're maybe testing and teasing that model a little bit with like, you know how you can lease phones now? Like, I think was it on the Apple keynote where they said you can now get this phone for $21 a month or something like that.
So the U.S. has had a program.
Yeah,
I forget what they call it, but yeah, the U.S. has had this. We don't have it in Canada except for if you're a business, then you
right.
can lease a phone. But in the U.S. for a good 2 years now, I think they've had I think they call it an upgrade program.
Yeah.
So you pay a monthly fee, and then you either have the choice to keep it or buy it at a certain price at the end of that year, or get a new phone. So yeah, and you know what? I think it's, again, this gets back to like, what are the things I don't want to worry about, right? Like with a phone, I don't want to worry about like, oh, how long should I keep this? I don't want to worry about, do I need to keep this in really good condition, so that if I need to sell it, it's like, it's not all busted and stuff like that. So I just think that, if they got rid of all those decisions and I could just
Yeah.
be like, cool, like, and the good thing about the US program is it's Apple Care Plus covered and everything. So it's like literally
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about anything, right? You could drop it, whatever. You just give it back to them at the end of the year and you get a
Yeah.
new phone, right? So
Yeah.
I would love that. So yeah, that's my like rant of the day.
Yeah,
But
I don't know how much that is like going to that model, or if that's really just offering again, like because if you think about the car industry, right? ETC car news. The car industry has basically this model of leasing, but it's not really motivated by the same thing. Like, it's motivated for financial reasons, right? Because people just can't afford like to buy these things, right? And so they come up with a model where they can borrow money and they can whatever. And I wonder if what's going on with these upgrade programs actually is more on that front, because these phones are getting so expensive now, right? It's like $2,000 for a phone. Might not want to afford that. Let's go for the monthly plan. So I don't know where the motivation lies, but I would be very interested to see a couple years from now when not if, when this happens, you're going to be like, episode 47, check it out.
Exactly.
I was right.
Exactly. I hope that's the case. And the expense thing is.
But
is
you're
really,
right, though. It makes sense, though. I think I would be pretty happy. I hate the idea of monthly fees and stuff like that. Just in general. You've probably heard me say this before, but I wish I could give like $1 billion to Hydro Ottawa so I would never have to pay a bill again. Like these kind of things where I just like.
But that's different because that never gets better, right? Like that service doesn't. So whereas I think, again, going back to software, like, you and I are both perfectly happy to pay for a lot of software because it gets better and you don't have to deal with things like installation and setup and things, right? Like it just removes all the things you don't want to deal with and you're left with something that keeps on getting better. But and on the costing, I think that, again, it is beer. These phones are crazy expensive. It is an interesting thing to look at because, I've always believed that, these are expensive devices, but I think everyone's in a different situation. I think if you ask a lot of people that have these phones, if you look at, that on a yearly basis, I would say it's actually one of the smaller expenses a lot of people have, right? And not to say it's on par with, you mentioned a car, right? Like arguably a car probably has a lot more utility for people who have one versus a phone.
Yeah.
But I think if you ask someone, would you live without your car or your phone for a day? Right. Yeah. That's interesting because I'm willing to bet that a lot of people like might actually choose a phone, right? Like,
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
So it's interesting because on that basis, it's like, it's still a very small cost in general life, right? Like these are expensive devices, but think how much you get out of it. And compared to all your other expenses, whether it's living expenses, things like cars, et cetera, or, like I think they seem expensive. I actually think that per dollar, you people get a lot.
Yeah, no. It makes sense. Like, I remember when, the first iPhone started costing more than a MacBook, and it's like, but you know what? It makes sense. Like the amount you use it and the amount you get out of it, you actually get way more out of it than you do a laptop, right? Like you're on a lot more. It's it's kind of your connection to the world, everything, right? So, definitely agree with that. So, so not to discount though your first opinion though, in terms of like the first category, which is, you know what, just use your phone till it's broken. But you're right. If you're not in that category, looking at this another way is definitely, I think a very interesting way, and I would not be surprised if things headed that way, right? Yeah. So
hopefully that makes you helps whoever's listening make a decision on your iPhone 12 purchase.